Good evening. We begin tonight with a stark and urgent warning delivered on the world stage. At the Munich Security Conference, a gathering of the world's most powerful leaders, a clear and challenging message was sent across the Atlantic. Senator Marco Rubio, a senior Republican voice on foreign policy, has just put Europe on notice, declaring that the continent must significantly increase its own defense spending and take greater responsibility for its security. This isn't just political rhetoric, it's a direct signal of a potential shift in American foreign policy, a shift that could redefine the bedrock of transatlantic security that has held for decades. The timing of this message could not be more critical. With the war in Ukraine grinding on and tensions simmering globally, the question of who pays for collective defense is no longer academic. It's a matter of immediate and pressing concern for every NATO member. Rubio's words, echoing sentiments from former President Trump, have sent ripples through the conference halls in Munich, forcing European leaders to confront an uncomfortable reality. The days of relying so heavily on the American security umbrella may be numbered. Tonight, we're going to break down what this means for you, for the United States, and for our allies in Europe. We'll look at the pointed speech that's dominating the conversation, the immediate reactions from European capitals, and the broader, profound implications for the future of NATO and global stability. The ground is shifting, and what happens next is of the utmost importance. We need to keep them honest. Let's get started. At the heart of the discussions in Munich was Senator Rubio's direct and uncompromising address. He didn't mince words. His central argument was that the United States is shouldering a disproportionate share of the financial and military burden for European security, a situation he described as unsustainable in the long run. He painted a picture of an America increasingly focused on challenges in other parts of the world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, suggesting that its resources and attention are finite. The era of America as the sole guarantor of European peace, he implied, is drawing to a close, and a new era of shared responsibility must begin immediately. Rubio specifically called out NATO allies, who have consistently failed to meet the alliance's defense spending target of 2% of their GDP. He framed this not just as a financial shortfall, but as a lack of serious commitment to their own defense in the face of clear and present dangers. He argued that for the transatlantic alliance to remain credible and effective, every member must pull their weight. His message was a clear wake-up call, intended to jolt European leaders out of what he sees as a state of complacency, urging them to invest in their own military capabilities, from ammunition production to advanced weapons systems, with a new sense of urgency. The senator's speech went beyond mere criticism. It was a strategic repositioning. He connected the issue of European defense spending directly to the political climate back in the United States. He explained that the American public, facing its own economic pressures, is growing weary of footing the bill for wealthy allied nations that appear unwilling to invest adequately in their own security. This sentiment, he warned, is not confined to one political party, but is a growing bipartisan concern. The patience of the American taxpayer, he stressed, is wearing thin, and future U.S. administrations will be under immense domestic pressure to reevaluate these long-standing commitments. Ultimately, Rubio's intervention was designed to force a difficult conversation. He wasn't just asking for more money. He was demanding a fundamental change in mindset from European leaders. He wants them to transition from being security consumers to security providers. This means not only increasing budgets, but also developing the political will to use their military power independently if necessary. The message was unmistakable. Europe must build up its own strength, not just as a supplement to American power, but as a robust and self-reliant pillar of the Western world's collective defense, ready to face the challenges of the 21st century on its own terms. The reaction from European leaders at the conference was a complex mixture of acknowledgement, defensiveness, and quiet concern. There was no outright dismissal of Rubio's points. In fact, many leaders, including NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, publicly agreed that European allies do need to invest more in defense. Stoltenberg reiterated that a record number of allies are now meeting or exceeding the 2% GDP target, attempting to frame the situation as a positive trend, a sign that the message has already been received and is being acted upon. He pointed to the significant increases in defense budgets across the continent since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. However, beneath this surface-level agreement, there were clear signs of apprehension. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, while highlighting Germany's own historic Zeitenwende, or turning point in defense policy, also subtly pushed back against the idea that Europe was not doing enough. He and other leaders emphasized the massive financial, humanitarian, and military aid that Europe has provided to Ukraine, arguing that these contributions are a significant part of their security investment, even if they don't all fall neatly into traditional defense budget calculations. There's a palpable frustration that their efforts are being downplayed or overlooked in the American political discourse. Privately, the mood among many delegations was one of anxiety. The specter of a potential return of Donald Trump to the White House loomed large over the entire conference, and Rubio's words were seen as a direct preview of what a second Trump presidency might mean for NATO. European diplomats were heard expressing worries about the reliability of the U.S. security guarantee, the so-called Article 5 commitment. The concern is that this isn't just about money anymore. It's about a fundamental questioning of the alliance's core principles from a significant faction within the American political establishment. This uncertainty is forcing them to plan for contingencies that were once unthinkable. French President Emmanuel Macron has long advocated for European strategic autonomy, and Rubio's comments have, in a way, bolstered his argument. His supporters would say, this moment proves his foresight. The French delegation and others who share this view used the opportunity to argue that Europe must accelerate its efforts to build its own independent defense capabilities, not in opposition to NATO, but as a stronger European pillar within it. The debate is no longer whether Europe should do more, but how quickly it can do so, and whether it can unite to create a truly cohesive defense industrial base and strategy, independent of the political winds blowing from Washington. To fully grasp the weight of Senator Rubio's remarks, it's crucial to understand the unique role of the Munich Security Conference. This isn't just another diplomatic meeting. For 60 years, it has served as the world's premier forum for debating international security policy. It's a place where presidents, prime ministers, defense ministers, and intelligence chiefs gather not just to give speeches, but to engage in frank, often behind-the-scenes conversations. It's a pressure cooker environment where global fault lines are exposed and alliances are tested in real time. The conference has a history of memorable moments, from Vladimir Putin's confrontational 2007 speech to Vice President Biden's reassurances to allies in 2009. This year, the context was particularly charged. The conference took place against the backdrop of the second anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a conflict that has fundamentally reshaped European security. The war is at a critical juncture, with Ukrainian forces facing severe ammunition shortages and a U.S. aid package stalled in Congress. This sense of crisis permeated every discussion, lending an air of desperation to the pleas from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who made a powerful personal appearance. The debate over supporting Ukraine was inextricably linked to the debate over the future of NATO and European defense. Furthermore, the conference is happening in a U.S. election year, and the prospect of a dramatic shift in American foreign policy is the elephant in the room. Donald Trump's recent comments suggesting he would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want to NATO allies who don't pay their fair share were reverberating through the halls of the Hotel Bayerischer Hof. While Senator Rubio's tone was more measured and traditionally Republican, his message was seen as part of the same broader trend of American skepticism towards its traditional alliances. It highlighted a deep division within the U.S. on foreign policy, leaving allies to wonder which America they should be listening to. The relationship between the U.S. and the European Union was therefore under an intense spotlight. For the past few years under the Biden administration, the focus has been on repairing and strengthening the transatlantic bond after the strains of the Trump years. There has been unprecedented cooperation on sanctions against Russia and support for Ukraine. However, Rubio's speech, delivered by a bipartisan congressional delegation, served as a potent reminder that this harmony could be fragile. It forced European leaders to confront the reality that depending on the outcome of an election, the entire foundation of their security architecture could be called into question once again, making the need for self-reliance more urgent than ever. When you strip away the diplomatic niceties, several critical takeaways emerged from this year's conference. First and foremost is the undeniable reality that European defense is now at the top of the agenda. The debate has permanently shifted from a theoretical discussion to a practical necessity. Leaders are no longer just talking about the 2% spending target. They are actively discussing joint procurement of weapons, the ramp-up of ammunition production, and the creation of a more integrated European defense industry. The question is no longer if, but how fast, and the pressure from Washington is serving as a powerful catalyst for this change. A second key takeaway is the deepening anxiety over the reliability of the United States as an ally. This is perhaps the most significant and worrying development. For decades, the U.S. security guarantee was the unquestioned bedrock of European security. Now, it's a subject of open debate. European leaders are being forced to plan for a future where they may not be able to count on American support in a crisis. This is leading to a strategic reassessment in capitals from Berlin to Warsaw, pushing them to forge stronger bilateral and regional security pacts within Europe as a hedge against American unpredictability. Third, the war in Ukraine was framed as a defining moment for the West. The conference highlighted a stark contrast. While European unity in supporting Ukraine has been strong, its military-industrial capacity has been exposed as woefully inadequate. The inability to produce enough artillery shells and other basic munitions to keep Ukraine in the fight has been a brutal reality check. This has laid bare the consequences of decades of underinvestment and has created a powerful consensus that Europe's defense industrial base must be rebuilt, and quickly, not just for Ukraine's sake, but for Europe's own future security. Finally, a major point of discussion was the global nature of modern security challenges. It's not just about Russia. Leaders discussed the strategic challenge posed by China, instability in the Middle East, and the security implications of climate change and emerging technologies, like artificial intelligence. Senator Rubio's comments about the U.S. needing to focus on the Indo-Pacific reinforced this point. It drove home the message that Europe can no longer expect the U.S. to be the world's policeman, handling every crisis. The world is becoming more multipolar, and Europe must become a capable and independent security actor in its own right to navigate this complex new environment. The discussions in Munich have set the stage for a fundamental debate about the future of transatlantic security. This isn't just about budgets and troop numbers. It's about the very soul and purpose of the Western alliance in the 21st century. One path forward involves a recommitment to the status quo, with Europe making incremental increases in defense spending while hoping that the traditional American leadership role remains intact, regardless of who is in the White House. Proponents of this view argue that the alliance has weathered storms before, and that its foundational values and shared interests will ultimately hold it together. They believe the current tensions are a temporary political fever that will eventually break. However, a second, more radical path is gaining traction: the pursuit of European strategic autonomy. This vision, championed by France but gaining currency elsewhere, imagines a Europe that is a geopolitical power in its own right, with the military and industrial capacity to defend its interests independently. This doesn't necessarily mean the end of NATO, but it would mean a rebalancing of the alliance into two more equal pillars, one North American, one European. This would require a level of political and military integration that Europe has never before achieved, a monumental undertaking that would involve overcoming deep-seated national interests and historical rivalries. The broader implications of this debate are immense. A more militarily capable Europe could be a stronger, more reliable partner for the United States, better able to share the burden of global security and manage crises in its own neighborhood. This would free up American resources to focus on other strategic priorities, such as competition with China. A stronger Europe could act as a stabilizing force in the world, upholding the rules-based international order. This is the optimistic view, the one that many in both Washington and Brussels hope to realize, turning the current crisis into an opportunity for a stronger, more balanced partnership. Conversely, the risks are equally profound. The path to European strategic autonomy is fraught with peril. A failure to achieve it could leave Europe fragmented and vulnerable, caught between a retreating America and an aggressive Russia. The process itself could also create new tensions, as debates over leadership, strategy, and burden sharing could divide the continent. Furthermore, a more inward-looking America and a more autonomous Europe could drift apart strategically, leading to a weaker, not stronger West. The decisions made in the coming months and years in response to the challenge laid down in Munich will determine which of these futures becomes our reality. So where does this leave us tonight? The message from Munich is unambiguous. The tectonic plates of global security are shifting. What Senator Rubio said wasn't just a speech. It was a reflection of a deep and growing sentiment within the United States. The questions he raised about burden sharing and commitment are not going away. They will be at the very center of the American political debate, and our allies are being forced to listen and to plan for a future that is far less certain than the past. This is a hinge moment, a point where the decisions made now will have consequences for decades to come. The challenge for Europe is immense. It requires not just increased spending, but a revolution in strategic thinking. It means overcoming national divisions to build a truly collective defense industrial complex. It means developing the political will to act decisively, with or without the United States leading the way. For the United States, the challenge is to manage this transition without shattering the very alliance that has been the bedrock of our security and prosperity for over 70 years. It's a delicate balancing act between demanding more from our allies and pushing them away completely. Ultimately, the future of the Transatlantic Alliance depends on whether both sides of the Atlantic can see this moment not as a crisis, but as an opportunity. An opportunity to forge a new, more balanced partnership, one built not on dependence, but on shared strength and mutual respect. The stakes are incredibly high. A failure to adapt could embolden adversaries and leave the West weaker and more divided. The conversation that dominated Munich is one we all need to be paying attention to. The world is watching. We'll be watching too.